Hello everyone, welcome to True Crime Time, where I tell you guys about famous serial killers and what they have done. Please relax, grab some snacks, and I hope you enjoy the video. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, there lived a man who seemed like someone you could trust. He entertained children at birthday parties, showed up to community events, and ran a successful business. People knew him as friendly, outgoing, and dependable. Some even knew him as Pogo the Clown, a character he performed as to bring smiles to families. But beneath that carefully built image was a reality that no one around him could have imagined. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy. At first glance, Gacy didn't fit the image people associate with criminals. He was involved in local politics, owned a contracting company, and seemed to be building a stable, respectable life. Neighbors saw a man who worked hard and contributed to the community. He hosted gatherings, joked with people, and appeared completely normal. That sense of normalcy is what made everything that followed so difficult for people to process. However, his past already contained warning signs. Years before the events that would make headlines, Gacy had been involved in serious legal trouble related to young men. He served time, and after his release, he moved to a new area to start over. In many ways, he succeeded. He rebuilt his reputation, regained trust, and once again became someone people didn't question. To those around him, it seemed like he had moved on from his past. During the 1970s, reports of missing teenage boys and young men in the area began to surface. At first, these disappearances didn't appear connected. The individuals came from different backgrounds, and there was no obvious pattern tying the cases together. For a while, they were treated as separate incidents, each with its own uncertainties. But over time, investigators began noticing overlaps, small details that pointed in a single direction. Several of the missing individuals had last been seen in situations connected to Gacy, either through work opportunities or brief encounters. As these connections became harder to ignore, law enforcement started to focus more closely on him. Even then, nothing immediately obvious gave away the truth. From the outside, his home looked like any other in the neighborhood. There were no clear signs of what investigators were about to uncover. Still, something didn't feel right. Witness accounts, timelines, and inconsistencies in Gacy's statements began to raise suspicion. People who knew him started to notice subtle changes in his behavior. At the same time, investigators continued building their case, piece by piece, trying to understand how these disappearances could be connected. Eventually, authorities obtained enough information to take a deeper look at his property. What they discovered there would become one of the most shocking moments in criminal history. Evidence found inside and beneath the house revealed that Gacy had been hiding a dark secret for years. The place that had seemed so ordinary from the outside was, in reality, central to everything investigators had been searching for. As the investigation unfolded, the scale of the situation became clear. Gacy was arrested, and as evidence continued to mount, he eventually confessed to multiple crimes. The case quickly gained national attention, not only because of what had happened, but because of who he appeared to be. People struggled to reconcile the image of a friendly, community-involved individual with the reality that was now being revealed. During the trial, the focus extended beyond the crimes themselves. There was intense interest in how Gacy had managed to maintain his double life for so long. Questions were raised about missed warning signs, about how trust is built, and about how someone could appear so normal while hiding something so serious. The courtroom became a place where people tried to make sense of something that didn't seem to make sense at all. In the end, the case left a lasting impact on both the community and the country as a whole. It changed the way many people thought about safety, trust, and the idea that danger doesn't always look the way we expect it to. For those who followed the story, one of the most unsettling aspects wasn't just what happened, but how it remained hidden in plain sight for so long. The story of John Wayne Gacy is often remembered as a reminder that appearances can be misleading. It shows how someone can build an image that others accept without question, while keeping a completely different reality hidden beneath the surface. And even now, it continues to raise the same question that people asked when the truth first came out. How well do we really know the people around us? In the late 1960s, fear began spreading across Northern California, not from a war or disaster, but from something far more uncertain. Messages sent by someone who seemed to be playing a game with the public and the police. This is the story of Zodiac Killer. It began with a series of attacks that appeared random at first. Young couples parked in quiet areas were targeted, and the details of the crimes suggested a level of planning that made investigators believe they were dealing with someone organized and deliberate. But what truly set this case apart wasn't just the violence, it was what came after. Soon, letters began arriving at local newspapers. These weren't ordinary notes. They were written by someone claiming responsibility for the crimes, and they were filled with cryptic symbols, coded messages, and chilling taunts directed at both the public and law enforcement. The writer referred to himself as Zodiac and insisted that his identity would remain unknown unless his cipher was solved. As the investigation continued, more letters arrived. Each one added another layer of confusion. Some contained partially decoded messages, while others challenged authorities to stop him. The public became increasingly obsessed, trying to interpret the symbols and uncover the meaning behind the codes. The case was no longer just a police investigation. It had become a psychological puzzle playing out in real time. Despite efforts from law enforcement, no clear suspect could be confirmed. Multiple individuals were investigated, but none could be definitively tied to all of the crimes or the letters. The lack of resolution only deepened the mystery. The Zodiac Killer seemed to exist in the space between fact and uncertainty, always one step ahead or just out of reach. Over time, the case expanded beyond the original incidents. New theories emerged, new suspects were proposed, and amateur investigators attempted to solve the remaining ciphers. Some messages were eventually decoded, revealing disturbing phrases and continued threats, but none of them provided a clear identity. Instead, they only reinforced the sense that the person behind them wanted attention, control, and fear. As years passed, the investigation slowed, but the fascination never disappeared. The Zodiac case became one of the most studied and debated unsolved mysteries in modern criminal history. Books, documentaries, and countless theories attempted to piece together the truth, yet no final answer ever emerged. Even today, the identity of Zodiac Killer remains unknown. The case stands as a reminder of how some mysteries resist resolution, even with decades of investigation, technology, and analysis. And it continues to leave behind the same unanswered question that first haunted investigators in the late 1960s. Who was behind the mask, and why did they want to be known, yet never caught? In the 1970s, across several states in the U.S., a pattern of disappearances and attacks began to emerge that investigators initially struggled to connect. The victims were often young women, many of them college students, taken from seemingly safe environments like campuses, apartments, and public spaces. What made the case even more disturbing was how ordinary the suspect appeared. This is the story of Ted Bundy. At the time, Bundy didn't fit the stereotype of a criminal. He was articulate, well-educated, and socially confident. He studied law, volunteered in political spaces, and presented himself as ambitious and trustworthy. People who met him often described him as charming and intelligent, someone who could easily gain trust in a short amount of time. That ability to appear normal would later become one of the most disturbing parts of the case. As the 1970s progressed, reports of missing women began to surface in Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. At first, law enforcement agencies treated these cases separately, as there was no immediate reason to believe they were connected. But over time, similarities started to appear. Witness descriptions and timelines suggested a man who used charm and deception to approach his victims, often in public settings. Bundy himself moved frequently during this period, studying and working in different states, which made it harder for investigators to track patterns early on. In several cases, survivors later came forward describing encounters with a man who pretended to need help or appeared injured, using that situation to get close enough to attack. These accounts became critical in forming a composite sketch that would eventually circulate widely. Eventually, Bundy became a suspect. Investigators began piecing together evidence that linked him to multiple disappearances and attempted escapes. However, even as suspicion grew, he managed to evade capture for a time, using changes in appearance, false identities, and legal knowledge to delay proceedings. His ability to manipulate situations and present himself differently, depending on the context, made the investigation more complicated. When Bundy was finally arrested, the case gained massive national attention. Court proceedings revealed details that shocked the public, not just because of the crimes themselves, but because of how long he had been able to avoid detection. The trial became a media spectacle, with intense interest in his behavior, testimony, and courtroom presence. Even during legal proceedings, Bundy maintained a level of composure that added to the unsettling nature of the case. As evidence was presented, the scope of his actions became clearer. Investigators linked him to multiple incidents across different states, and the pattern of behavior that had once seemed fragmented began to form a more complete picture. The case highlighted not only the crimes themselves, but also the challenges law enforcement faced when dealing with suspects who moved frequently and presented themselves as ordinary members of society. Eventually, Bundy was convicted and sentenced, bringing legal closure to many of the cases tied to him. However, the psychological impact of the case extended far beyond the courtroom. It changed how investigators approached patterns of missing persons cases and how the public viewed the idea of trust and appearance. The story of Ted Bundy remains one of the most widely studied criminal cases in history. It continues to raise questions about deception, manipulation, and how someone can maintain a carefully constructed public image while hiding a completely different reality. And even today, it stands as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous individuals are the ones who appear the most ordinary. In August 2018, a quiet suburban neighborhood in Frederick, Colorado, became the center of one of the most disturbing family-related criminal cases in modern American history. At first, it looked like a typical missing persons report. A pregnant mother and her two young daughters had disappeared without explanation. But as investigators dug deeper, the story quickly began to unravel in a way no one expected. This is the case of Chris Watts. Chris Watts appeared, on the surface, to be living an ordinary life. He had a job in the oil industry, a home, a wife, and two daughters, with another child on the way. Friends and neighbors described the family as normal, even happy in public. Social media posts showed smiling photos, family moments, and what seemed like a stable household. Nothing immediately suggested what was about to come. Everything changed when Chris reported his wife, Shanann Watts, and their two daughters missing. He appeared in interviews, asking for their safe return, speaking calmly and emotionally in front of cameras. At first, it seemed like a heartbreaking disappearance. Police began searching the area, trying to understand what could have happened in such a short period of time. But investigators quickly noticed inconsistencies in Chris's statements. His timeline kept changing. Details didn't match. His behavior also raised concern. He appeared unusually detached for someone whose entire family had just vanished. As the investigation continued, authorities began looking more closely at the dynamics inside the home and the relationship between Chris and Shanann. Shanann had recently returned from a work trip with the children, and text messages suggested tension in the relationship. Investigators started piecing together surveillance footage, phone data, and neighbor reports to reconstruct what had happened in the hours leading up to the disappearance. The more they uncovered, the more the situation shifted from a missing persons case to something far more serious. Eventually, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. Afterward, his behavior changed significantly, and investigators intensified questioning. Faced with mounting evidence, he began to provide a different account of events. The case took a dramatic turn as inconsistencies collapsed under scrutiny, and the investigation moved toward uncovering the full truth. What followed was a confession that shocked both investigators and the public. Chris Watts admitted to causing the deaths of his wife and children, revealing details that contradicted his earlier public pleas. The contrast between his public image during the search and the reality of what had occurred made the case especially disturbing for many people following it. Authorities later recovered evidence that confirmed his involvement, and the case proceeded through the legal system quickly due to the seriousness of the crime and the confession. The courtroom proceedings focused heavily on motive, timeline, and the events leading up to the tragedy. Unlike many long investigations, this case moved toward resolution in a relatively short period once the confession was made. Chris Watts was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case left a lasting impact, not only because of the crime itself, but because it involved a family unit that appeared normal to the outside world. It forced many people to reflect on how little can sometimes be seen from the surface of someone's life. The story of Chris Watts continues to be discussed in documentaries, podcasts, and analysis videos because of its psychological complexity and the contrast between public appearance and private reality. It remains one of the most unsettling modern cases, not because of mystery or lack of answers, but because the truth was so difficult to accept once it was revealed. In the 1950s, in the rural town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, a case emerged that would later influence some of the most iconic horror stories in film and literature. It wasn't just the crimes themselves that shocked investigators. It was the disturbing conditions they uncovered and the person at the center of it all. This is the story of the man often referred to as the Wisconsin Butcher, Ed Gein. Ed Gein lived a quiet, isolated life on a rundown farm after the death of his strict and deeply religious mother. To outsiders, he appeared to be an odd but harmless man who kept to himself. He rarely socialized and spent most of his time alone on the property. Over time, neighbors began to notice his increasing isolation, but few suspected what was happening behind closed doors. When authorities were eventually called to investigate a missing person case connected to the area, they arrived at Gein's property expecting a simple lead. Instead, what they discovered inside his home revealed something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The investigation quickly expanded as officers began carefully examining the house and surrounding property. Inside the farmhouse, investigators found evidence that suggested Gein had been engaging in deeply disturbing behavior involving grave robbing. Items recovered from the home indicated that he had taken remains from local cemeteries and used them to create unsettling objects and household items. The discovery stunned law enforcement and immediately transformed the case into a major investigation. Gein was taken into custody for questioning, and as the investigation continued, more details about his life and mental state began to emerge. He had been living in extreme isolation for years, and his attachment to his mother's memory appeared to have played a significant role in shaping his behavior. After her death, he reportedly struggled with loneliness and fixation, which investigators later believed contributed to his actions. Psychological evaluations were conducted to determine his mental state. Experts concluded that Gein was not fully detached from reality, but his understanding of morality and normal social behavior was severely distorted. As a result, he was found unfit for trial at the time and was committed to psychiatric care instead of being sent to prison immediately. The case gained national attention, not only because of the crimes themselves, but because of what they revealed about isolation and psychological breakdown. Over time, the details of the investigation became widely discussed in media and later inspired fictional characters in horror stories, though the real case remained far more grounded in psychological disturbance than fiction often portrays. Ed Gein spent the rest of his life in mental health institutions, largely away from public view. He was later deemed fit for trial years after his initial arrest and was convicted in connection with confirmed charges, though many aspects of the case remained centered around his mental health rather than public courtroom proceedings. The story of Ed Gein continues to be studied because of its impact on criminal psychology and its influence on popular culture. It stands as one of the most unsettling cases in American history, not only because of what was discovered, but because it raised lasting questions about isolation, mental illness, and how extreme environments can shape human behavior over time. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.